Come along, children. Now we're going to have a little music.
What's up, guys? Welcome to First Cut. This is our review for King of Staten Island. I'm Andres.
This is RB3.
I'm Sabrina.
I'm Cade.
Hey, we got Cade in the house. What is up, man? You're a big Judd Apatow fan, so we wanted to bring you in for this review. This is one of the biggest VOD releases that is not kid-based, that is not directed towards a child audience. So this is actually kind of a big deal, this movie. It's Pete Davidson starring in the role, directed by Judd Apatow, obviously, as we said before. But this movie is kind of eerily similar and very personal to, I think, both Judd Apatow and especially Pete Davidson. But I definitely want to get your guys' thoughts, especially you, Sabrina, because I know you were really looking forward to this. What do you think of the movie now that you saw it?
Oh my gosh. Well, now that I've seen it 3 times since it's been released. So, and it's been literally like a little over 48 hours. So I finished my 3rd viewing this morning, and I absolutely, if you can't tell from how many rewatches, I enjoyed this so much. It lived up completely to my expectations. I've talked about Pete Davidson kind of a lot anywhere I possibly can, because I think, a lot. I think he is extremely underrated. I think when you have a talent like this, he was the youngest person to be cast on SNL since Eddie Murphy. That's a big deal. So Lorne Michaels and everybody involved had to see something in him. He made a name for himself in comedy at the young age of 17. Like that's really insane. You have to have that stage presence. And so I was really looking forward to him kind of being that like leading man, which we saw a little bit as like a supporting character in Big Time Adolescence. But I wanted to see this entire film based off of his life, similar to a Honey Boy situation with Shia LaBeouf. I feel like he found his catharsis writing this with Judd Apatow and starring in this kind of film. There's a lot I'm excited to explore in this review with you guys, but yeah, I loved it.
Wow. Cade?
Yeah, this pair up of Judd Apatow and Pete Davidson couldn't be better. I'm a huge Judd Apatow fan. Pete Davidson, also a big fan of his, and I think that the script definitely has the markings of all of the Judd Apatow things that we look for, like romance and intimate relationships, like grounded in like this hilarious world. And I think that, as Sabrina was saying, like the youngest member of SNL kind of reminds me of when Pete Davidson made a cameo in Trainwreck, the Amy Schumer movie, which also has some similarities to The King of Staten Island. And that cameo on Trainwreck was, what landed him eventually the role to be on SNL. And then sort of seeing that relationship sort of bloom and seeing how they brought all of these stand-up comedians in who I love into the fold of like the world that they built in the movie was just so fun. And it was really emotional too, which I really enjoyed. I think the pacing was, I think the pacing could have been a little bit faster, but I think it matched the tone of the main character a lot. So really enjoyed it.
Good deal. RB3.
I really enjoyed it too. I love, like Kay said, I love Judd Apatow. I love a lot of his movies. I've noticed through like the first half of his career with like 40-Year-Old Virgin and Knocked Up. And those movies are a little bit more like comedic and a little bit like more broad. And I think like as his career evolved, especially like past like 2009, I think as she started doing more like kind of not fully biographical or autobiographical movies, but like kind of in that realm. And the one I kind of think of the most when I think of something like this movie, The King of Staten Island, is actually Funny People that he did with Adam Sandler and Seth Rogen. And it was kind of, it dealt with this famous comedian dude who was like at the end of his career, and he had a disease that he was kind of sick, and he thought he was going to die, so he kind of starts like reliving his life a little bit. And even though Adam Sandler didn't necessarily like have like a life-threatening disease, it was very biographical to the sense of like it being about like the downfall of like Adam Sandler's career and all that. And then it was very like, it was funny, but it was also very, very emotional and very, very dramatic. And I think that's where the King of Staten Island kind of differentiates itself from like a lot of Judd Apatow's work is that I think it leans way more dramatic than it does comedic for sure. I didn't really find myself laughing all that much, but I did find myself like moved like a lot more through this movie. So
yeah, you bring up such an interesting conversation because that's kind of what I was going to go to you guys to talk about anyways, was the idea of, did you feel more of the drama? Did you feel more emotion from a Pete Davidson center character, or did you feel more of like the silly, ridiculous comedy? I surprisingly kind of go the opposite of you, RB3. I thought this was more comedic than it was emotional. I thought other movies, I hate to compare, but something like maybe like a Silver Linings Playbook or something like that is much more emotional and much more dramatic, and just a little bit of comedy sprinkled throughout. This one felt like more like a lot of improv, a lot of comedic sets, a lot of comedic moments, and then just a little bit of emotion sprinkled throughout maybe the middle scene and the last scene. That's just my vibe. I don't know if you guys disagree or not, Sabrina.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think Pete Davidson has created that brand of like really dark humor, and it definitely is not everybody's cup of tea, and you could kind of take it certain ways. So I laughed a ton because I enjoy dark humor, but I also cried a ton. So I feel like I had a really balanced mixture of both, and that's really why I enjoyed it, because I mean, I think it's one of the most authentic, raw kind of portrayals of mental illness and grief and trauma and moving forward and powering through. So there are those heavy hitting emotional moments, but then again, you have Pete Davidson as a protagonist, and he's being Pete Davidson. It actually is really interesting because he named his character after his father. So he took his father's name when he was playing Scott. And that's why I mentioned earlier about that catharsis from playing a role like this, because I think something like this is very necessary in his career to go forward and to kind of deal with all of this, because it's really unfortunate that we see when people talk about Pete Davidson, they talk about his personal life more than his actual talent. They talk about who he's dating. They talk about his mental illness. And it's kind of like this movie deals with so much of that in a very subtle way and goes forward. So I feel like this is kind of a turning point in his career. And he did a really great job. And like Cade said, the way Judd Apatow kind of dissects relationships is something that I really, really admire, because like it's his relationship with his friends with benefits, played by Belle Powley, who's amazing in Diary of a Teenage Girl. It's so incredible, and she's amazing in this film.
And amazing in this, yeah.
Yeah, amazing. And Maud Apatow, Judd's daughter, is also a standout as his sister, and their relationship, and then his relationship with his mother, his relationship, something that really quick that I find so interesting about this whole idea of like the catharsis that comes into it is slightly kind of spoiler, but it shows in the trailer. He finds his solace in the firehouse, and he spends the entire like 2/3 of the movie talking down on firemen, talking down on firefighters because of what he experienced. And this is probably I'm assuming the way that he's gone about it kind of in his life as well. And he finds his solace stepping into the position that his dad was in. And so even the way Judd Apatow portrays the relationship between Bill Burr and Pete Davidson in this one, I think is something that's really, really incredible, because you have all these very vibrant supporting characters. They're all really great. They all get their moment to shine. They all, regardless with our protagonist, with all the things he's dealing with, you see the way it's affecting everybody around him as well. And that's something that I really, really just loved about this movie. So yeah, to answer your question, that's why I found that balance of humor, but also really, really deep emotional heart.
Did the emotional stuff work for you, Cade?
Yeah, I think what's so great about this story and like how it verges on the reality of Pete Davidson's real life is that it is all of this repressed emotion. You know, our main character is suffering. He's never properly dealt with the death of his father and having to step into the manhood role of the household and, you know, sort of neglecting those expectations. And we kind of see the comedy come through, you know, dealing with that pain and speaking just like the truth about a situation. And I think it's really interesting because him and the mom character are both sort of in the same predicament in their lives, but at different ages. And, you know, the Bill Burr character is so funny and so great and sort of brings a new life into their family dynamic that sort of was needed to uproot these emotions and sort of figure out how can we live life dealing with the death of the father and accepting and moving on, and also still keeping, true to what it means to be the king of Staten Island. Because I feel like I've seen it twice, and I think in the second viewing, I sort of looked at it through this lens of like, if he is the king of Staten Island, what is everyone else? And, sort of seeing the relationships about it, it sort of unfolds as like a court of people that sort of revolve around his, arrested development,
around his issues. And I think that to me is like ultimately why I found the movie leaning like way more dramatic to me, because even in his moments of like dark humor, you kind of tell us like a defense mechanism for like what he's like really hiding like deep down, and like the flaws that he's internalizing. And I mean, honestly, to me, it was like so hard to watch. Like the first 20 minutes, I kind of like stopped and I was like, yo, I don't know if I could like keep going with this anymore, because this dude's like way too reckless, like way too self-destructive. Like it was just, right. I mean, it started off like he was literally almost about to kill himself, like driving in the car. And that's, I don't know if that's a spoiler. That's literally the opening scene.
It literally starts out with that.
Yeah. So it's like they already set the tone of like, yo, this dude is like really, really messed up. And, because it's so autobiographical to who we know Pete Davidson is now, and he's spoken on his mental illness and on his thing. So it feels like very transparent, like Sabrina said, is raw and is like very authentic in that way. So to me, it almost feels like, I guess I had a hard time with it because it almost felt like too real. It felt like something that we see a lot of people, especially in our generation, dealing with today. And it's really hard and upsetting, but it's real life. So
yeah, can I talk about that? The idea of the enjoyment of the movie in relationship with your knowledge of Pete Davidson as an actual person. Because we have to talk about that, right? The idea of something like, if my parents watch this movie and they'll be like, oh, that was okay, because they don't know about Pete Davidson versus all four of us do. Like I do. I know about Pete Davidson a lot because I watch SNL every week, and I've watched SNL every week for the past 10 years. So I know a lot about his life. But that's kind of the relationship we're dealing with as far as our enjoyment of this movie, knowing that it's slightly autobiographical. I don't know what you guys think about that, the idea of how people can watch this movie, and is it supposed to be in relationship with your knowledge of Pete Davidson? Sabrina.
Yeah, I think a lot of people can genuinely find something out of this to enjoy, since it explores so many different things. But I do feel like this is almost kind of like a love letter to our generation and what we feel. So not even just Pete Davidson, but I don't know, I resonated with Scott a lot in the movie, and not everybody does, but I think you might know somebody like him. When you see his group of friends, people like that. And that's another testament to kind of like the world building, I'm saying, that they did with Staten Island. All the actors, all the characters, even the people who are on screen for like 2 seconds, like different diners at like the restaurants and things like that, you get a feel. I've never been to Staten Island, but I completely understood everything that they talked about. When I know it's nicknamed like the Forgotten Borough, and that's something that they kind of slightly tackle with his Friends with Benefits, who wants to kind of like do city planning and redo the way they see that. And so it's really cool to look at it from our perspective, because even though Pete is the focus and we know Pete, I feel like our generation can kind of find a lot in there because of how open we all are with like mental illness and with things like that. I feel like we have an understanding even outside of Pete Davidson.
Yeah, I'm going to talk a little bit about that just because you brought it up, and I think it has to be talked about, if I'm being honest. The idea of Staten Island being this part of this character. I watched this show called What We Do in the Shadows. It's one of my favorite shows on TV right now. It's also set in Staten Island. There is this weird New York vibe fascination with this idea of location in your city and your dominance and all this right now, right? They talk about it in the movie about Brooklyn. Brooklyn right now is one of the biggest media conglomerates in the world, right? ESPN is out there. CNN is out there. There's just a giant media corporation. There's a ton of young people around my age who work in the media. Vice is out there.
I know the Barclays Center.
The Barclays Center, Jay-Z kind of, revitalized this thing. The Nets
gentrified it. Yeah, sure.
But that's what I'm saying. We really have to talk about it. If I'm being honest, sorry, Pete Davidson, but the reason why is because of gentrification, is because of this race issue that often goes ignored in New York. And yes, I'm specifically talking about Staten Island. Staten Island is known for being very racist, and that's kind of why they've been so resistant towards change, because they don't want to accept these other people from the outside. So I'm just a little bit like, oh, with that Kelsey scene. Her name is Kelsey in the movie, because I was like, oh, I don't know if that's the best example, because that's another example of gentrification, and that's the only way we need to improve, is to push out all the minorities.
Yeah, I think I grew up on Long Island, which is
there you go,
right next to Staten Island, and Staten Island kind of reminds me of like a mini Long Island, because Long Island is actually historically one of the most segregated places in the North and in the country, with like house zoning and how they kind of laid out the island in a way where they sort of entrench these racist systems in there. And I think that's definitely trying to be remedied with like this weird gentrification, but it's definitely like not leaving anyone feeling sort of fulfilled. And I think that if you look at Staten Island as sort of a metaphor for Pete Davidson's character, I think you can sort of get a lot of value out of how his girlfriend character is trying to, build the city up and trying to renovate the city and make it, what she thinks it can be. And it's sort of the same thing with this character.
Well, yeah, I just had to bring it up because I do feel like there is a conversation to be had about that, because
absolutely,
I feel like a lot of people just ignore Black people and just ignore the other minorities. They're like, my God, how many Puerto Ricans and Dominicans are there? Like a lot. Let me just say that as a Latino guy. But that's something that I feel like is one of the reasons why there's this disconnect between New York cities and New York areas. But I want to go back to the center of the movie, because I do feel like there is a lot of standouts in this movie. And I don't know if I'm the only one who thought there was a lot of improv. Did you guys catch that?
I did, yeah.
Or was I the only one who was like, oh my God, this whole thing is improv?
There's
no way they wrote this.
Yeah, just knowing, how Judd Apatow sort of always leaves room for improv. The whole time I was like always trying to figure out like, I wonder if this was scripted. Like, oh, dude. I wonder, I kept going back and forth with that.
What's some of your favorite comedic moments? Because if I'm being honest, just kind of going off my first statement, I thought the comedy really stood out a little bit more than the emotional aspects for me personally, specifically with the Pete Davidson character. That's just me. And maybe that's just because the big emotional climactic scene didn't hit super hard for me. And maybe that's just because of all the random over-the-top explosions that were coming out of every window. I don't know if you guys caught that, where I was like, I don't know if this is working for me.
I think there's this weird thing kind of going on in this movie where it's like Pete Davidson is an emotion, like kind of his thing is being emotionless, like Sabrina said, the dark humor. Yes. And so I think he's a great actor, and he actually kind of surprised me at how great he was as an actor. But I think there's this thing that comes with him that doesn't necessarily serve the emotional side of the movie as well, but it's sort of more of a psychological, analyzation of, what he's going through. I feel like
that's exactly it. I feel like I know what they're trying to say, but I feel like he maybe facially or maybe emotionally doesn't verbalize it through his micro emotions, like another actor might. And maybe that's just, I don't think that's a discredit to him. That's just not his ability. Like you said, he's very emotionless. That's kind of his character. That's his vibe. And maybe that's why I didn't feel the emotional aspects as much as maybe like an RB3 did. I got it more from like Marissa Tomei, her character, or more from Kelsey, Belle Powley's character. That's more the emotional stuff I got. I didn't really get it from him. But the comedic stuff I loved, and I thought it was really funny, and I thought it was just a really good example of improv. And that accent is never not funny. I'm sorry. It's a very over-the-top, funny accent, and I've heard people speak from there, and that's how they talk. It's amazing. So what are some of your favorite comedic moments, guys? I'm gonna go to you, RB3.
Comedic moments. See,
you thought this movie wasn't funny at all, bro.
I really, no, I mean, if I'm being 100% honest,
I thought the whole movie was funny.
I really didn't laugh like once. Like, if I'm being 100% honest, it's not an insult. Like, I mean that in like the most sincere way possible.
I think
like,
I took the emotional stuff from this movie and I laughed at it. And I think you took the emotional stuff. I was like, you were like crying.
And I was like, genuinely concerned. I was like, man, we got to get this dude some help. Like, I was for me, like the entire movie, I was like, yo, this guy's like really. So I don't know. For me, I guess I didn't really like see as much like comedic stuff. I mean, for me, I did think it was funny when they tried to rob the pharmacy. Like,
that's what I was gonna say. I was gonna say the pharmacy scene. That scene was so funny. Like the fact that their safe card was the text, and that's the same thing that was getting them in trouble and getting them shot. And then the escalation of that was just great. It was the idea of like,
dude, and the fact that Moises Arias is in this movie, like that alone, like just makes it great.
That was so funny. And the fact that the text, not the text, the ringtones kept
was The Office.
The Office. I forgot the second one.
That was so good. All the little details are so good.
Mm-hmm. See, that to me was like one of the funniest scene where I was actually laughing out loud.
Yeah. I think his relationship with his friends, the way we're introduced to them when they're watching like The Purge, and they're even like, oh, it takes place in Staten Island, stuff like that, and they're messing with them about like his tattoo about his dad, and they mess with that girl who's like new to the group or things like that. I loved all of those interactions, and even the running joke that with Carla, with Moises Arias.
Yeah, that was funny too.
That was so good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's so many little. I was seriously laughing and crying like the entire time. I didn't know what to feel, but like also I feel like it was for myself that it was tonally balanced, because I would literally go from like laughing to crying, but I felt good doing it. I don't know.
Yeah. The conversations, I feel like a lot of Judd Apatow's work is like very conversation dialogue based, which is why I think the improv is so cool, because like it kind of brings this new life to it. But I think like a lot of the conversations in this movie were like so well written and so well acted that it was like you were saying, like one conversation could be like hilarious and the next could just be like completely heart-wrenching. But I think for me, some of the funnier moments that stood out, because I am sort of more in Sabrina's camp where it's like half and half. I think that a lot of like the little guest appearances and guest actors that were actually stand-up comedians, like those were some of my favorite moments in the movie. Like Jesse Kirsten is the pharmacist with the gun, and I wish that they had put a little bit more of her in there. Pamela Adlon, who plays the ex-wife, she's so great and like so funny.
She's great in that show Better Times too, or Better Things on FX. If you haven't seen that show, that's a great show.
Highly recommend that show.
Oh, another thing really quick. A scene that literally is so simple, and this is what I'm talking about, where I was laughing the entire time. So like I've been around a lot of kids. I've babysat for a lot of kids throughout my life. So when he's first walking them to school, the mom's boyfriend's kids, and the little girl, she's just like, I sing. And then she just starts singing, and his reaction, those interactions are so sweet and so wholesome and so funny. Like that's just what kept me like smiling and laughing throughout it, was just little moments like that. And that one killed me, because that's how kids literally talk. Like it's very authentic dialogue. It's very real. That's how kids are. They're like, I sing, and then they just belt out into song. It's so funny.
And those kids in the movie are like the most, like low-key the most important characters, and also like the least important characters, you know, like because it's how they meet, and it's like kind of helps him show up to like responsibility a little bit.
And I felt like those kids were told to be kids. Like they were like Sabrina said, it's very natural, their conversational style. Like they probably even asked the kid, like, if you wanted a tattoo, who would it be of? And he probably said Punisher. Kids love the Punisher. Like that's an actual thing. It felt very natural that little boy was like into superheroes, and he liked drawing, and he made up his own, and he liked the Punisher. I was like, that's a little 9-year-old boy.
And speaking of the comics, salute to Bill Burr. He produced Mark Ellis's special Dog Stepfather, which I was the camera operator on. So salute to Bill Burr. He was great in this movie.
He was in The Mandalorian.
He was in The Mandalorian. He was great in that too. He was my favorite part in this movie, I think. And So is Marissa Tomei. But
I was gonna say, yeah, let's say who's our kind of our standout. You already said yours, Bill Burr.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's great. No, keep going, man. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh no, just Bill Burr. I mean, that's if we're just talking individual standouts. Yeah, he's probably my favorite part of this movie.
Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say I'm so happy that Bill Burr and Judd Apatow finally did something like this together.
Yeah.
No, my thing was the thing that had me rolling, and it's only because, and I texted you guys in my text chain as I was watching the movie, was when he was like, just because I'm a football fan, when he's like, dude, who bets on the Jets? And he's like, the Jets are gonna come back. He's like, no, they're not. They're not coming back. I was like, dude, that's the funniest, and I'm sure that was improv too. And he's like, they're gonna come back.
Yeah. There's another
dying.
There's I forget who is the exact comedian, but he was also in Trainwreck. But the old dude who he's talking to at the party, and I forget exactly what he said like they were at the graduation party, and he was talking to an older guy.
That guy's great.
Yeah. I forget exactly what they're talking about, but we're
talking about college, right?
Yeah, when they're at the college
graduation party. He was like, "Don't go to college."
Are you talking about Pete Davidson's
don't go to party. Don't go to college. Yeah, don't go to college. Is that
that was so good.
That's his grandpa.
Oh, that's his real grandpa. Oh,
that's his real grandpa.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool. And
no, keep going. I'm sorry.
Oh no, you go.
No, the scene that also killed me was when they were boxing for tips.
Yes.
And the guy, when Pete Davidson's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Oh, I saw Creed." He's like, "What? I saw Creed, bro. I saw Creed." And he starts doing that, like, just that killed me too.
And the Hulk gloves.
Yeah, and the Hulk gloves. Yeah,
so funny.
So much. But yeah, Marissa Tomei and Bill Burr, like, I really do believe that they ground this film so much, because when we are focused on Pete Davidson, I feel like without them, they kind of like, guided him throughout this entire film in like little ways. And their performances are just so good. So even though I'm not saying Pete Davidson's the best actor in the entire world, he's only 26, so he has a lot of time to work on that. But the fact that they're so good when he's in scenes with them, it's like he's brought up to a certain level because of their interactions together. So I really do believe that they are vital to this film, and they're complete standouts. They were so great.
Yeah, who's a standout for you, Cade?
I want to say Jimmy Tatro, but he wasn't in it too much. So
I shouted him out before when we did the Bad Education review. Good dude. Great dude.
Yeah,
we met him before.
I think that for me, the absolute standout would have to be Belle Powley, who played Kelsey. Because I just love I love her acting style. I think that in the morning show, she was one of my favorites too. So no surprise that she's one of my favorites here too.
She was my choice as well. She's incredible in this movie. Oh my God.
I can't wait to see her in more things. Like, she's just so fun.
Yeah. She's so freaking good. Like, she blew me away. Honestly, for me, it was Marissa Tomei and her. Marissa Tomei is just like legend already. So but she's so young that it blew me away, that I was like, oh man, this girl is incredible. We
can't ignore Steve Buscemi though. We can't ignore Steve Buscemi.
Yes.
To me, he was like out of the park, like in this movie to me. So he was really great in this movie too.
He's great.
And one more, and I know there's so many. I could genuinely go through this film in order and just list everything that was funny and talk about it for like 5 hours. But another really great like scene that I really loved is when they're talking about his dad and like the wild stuff he did, and he kind of gets this different understanding of who his dad was that his mom kind of didn't really show him. And I thought that was really funny. I thought there was a lot of sweet moments in that. And Pete actually talked about in real life that's based off of conversations he had with guys that his dad worked with and his friends when he was alive. So I really like that.
Yeah. Any final thoughts, guys? I'll start with you, RB3.
Yeah, overall, I really enjoyed it. If I had like one overarching critique, I think it was too long. And I think that's a criticism I think that has been like consistent through Judd Apatow's movies. Even though I do appreciate the improv, I do think there's sometimes it went on just like a little too long, and you could cut down a little bit.
I know one scene in specific, but yeah.
I think they could have. I think if it was like a trim, like 2 hours, I think I would have maybe got the comedic beats a little bit better, and it would have flowed a little smoother. But overall, I really liked it. I was really moved by it. Even though Pete Davidson's character Scott is to me like almost an unredeemable character in like a lot of ways. I still really like found a lot of attachment to him, and like found his journey really emotional. So I really dug it on that level.
Sabrina?
Yeah, so I enjoyed like a lot about this film. I agree, it is something that's in Judd Apatow's filmography, kind of like the length of stuff. We've seen that with like Trainwreck, since it's a similar story. But I did enjoy it. The pacing was a little off, but it worked for me just because I enjoyed everything that was kind of going on in all those characters and just fleshing them all out. So I would definitely recommend watching it. Like I said in the beginning, I do think it's one of the best portrayals of like mental illness that we've seen in a long time, because it is very raw, it is authentic. He's basing it off stuff from his own life. So I think that there's a lot to get out of it.
Cade?
Yeah, I really love this movie. I think that it balances humor and drama really, really well. The cast is one of my favorite casts of comedians that I've seen on screen in a long time. I think the intro could have been taken down by about 10 minutes. I think that they should have gotten to the romance with the mom and Bill Burr just a little bit quicker. I think that the way they showed adult love side by side with young love and sort of the different challenges that those two fields present was really well done. And it's kind of a look into what Pete Davidson's life might have been like without comedy. So I think that if you're in for a long ride that's fun and emotional, definitely check out the movie.
Yeah, I think we all agree that overall we really enjoyed it for sure. Obviously, some of us thought it was more comedic than it was emotional, but overall we really did enjoy it. I think the final thing I want to say is the first thing that I texted you guys, and I didn't even know that Pete Davidson and I had this connection, but I grew up on obviously Kanye, but Kanye got me on Cudi. Cudi is like one of my all-time favorite like rappers. Like he's literally one of my inspirations. And this song opens with Cudi, and then obviously it's an emotional scene and all that. But I was still like, "Oh crap, it's Cudi!" And then Fabulous comes in, bro. I was in high school when that song came out. You guys were like 10. You guys probably don't even know what song I'm talking about. It was the "She Be Killing Him, She Be Killing Him."
Oh yeah, that song. Yeah.
I was like, Fabulous, bro. You remember Fabulous? Like that's so old school, bro.
The music in this movie was really good.
The music, they had a violin cover of Red Hot Chili Peppers. Did you guys catch that?
I did catch that.
I was like, what is this?
Yeah, they did a good job.
Incredible. Yeah, the music is great. It was definitely probably my biggest standout besides the acting, because I did think Bel Powley and Marissa Tomei were incredible. But overall, guys, that is our thoughts on The King of Staten Island. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the movie as well. Let us know in the comments down below. What did you think? Do you agree, disagree? Let us know in the comments. Who is your standout in this movie? We're going to personally go around the table when it comes to where you can find us. I'm at Squad Leader Ace.
I'm at Director RB3.
I'm at Sabrina X Monica.
I'm at Cade Hughesby.
And you can find us at First Cut TMO on Twitter and Instagram. And be sure to subscribe if you haven't done so already. For the First Cut crew, I'm Andres.
This is RB3.
I'm Sabrina.
I'm Cade.
And we're peacing out. Peace out, guys.
Live up to anybody's expectations. Hey, thanks for listening to all this. You're one of the few people who treat me, like a person.
You're welcome.